This video of Birds of a Feather has garnered 15 million views in 4 months. That is unequivocally the most viewed live from the studio performance that I have ever seen. Today, we're gonna recreate it as accurately as possible. We have a world-class studio. I've taken Phineas's Mix with the Masters course on Birds of a Feather, and I've done countless hours of research on how they mixed Birds of a Feather for the studio version as well. We're gonna apply all of these techniques to unequivocally the biggest production that I have ever done on this channel. So right now you're talking to me after I already did everything. It was wild, and it was a lot of work. For now though, I'm gonna kick it over to Past Me. Let's all take pity on him because he has no idea what he's getting into. So I want to start by reacting to the actual video and just trying to find like little clues that we can see right from the get-go. Just from this first frame, this actually tells us a lot of information about the drums. This session is basically going to be like a drum session and like some other stuff. That's basically what this is, a drum session, and like other instruments are there too. So if we check this out, we can see 3 different overheads. They look like Telefunken C12s or maybe Neumann UM57s. And on top of that, we see a Sennheiser MD441 on the snare. That's another really, really nice microphone. And one thing that we get to do on this session that we don't normally get to do, we have access to an amazing, amazing studio, and we could actually use the exact same microphones, or at least the exact same level of firepower. So already starting to construct the kit sound off the very first frame. So the first thing that I noticed, all 4 of the singers in front are using dynamic microphones. That's important because they're like 10 feet back from the kit, and the kit's gonna be really loud in this room, especially in reference to the vocals. So you're not gonna get too much of the kit bleeding into the vocal sound, leading to a much cleaner vocal sound. Okay, looks like we can see the kick. We have 2 different microphones on the kick. That is a Neumann U47. That's an incredibly nice vintage microphone. You can even see like Frank Sinatra using that microphone. That's how far back that goes. Then we have an unknown microphone as the kick in. This is gonna give you 2 different sounds for the drum kit. Kick in microphones usually have a much more aggressive attack and a much quicker decay, leading to a solid thump that you probably would expect from a kick drum. Kick out microphones, because they are getting a little bit more of the resonance from outside of the drum, tend to have a longer decay. They're typically described as rounder. When you fuse them together, you can kind of get the best of both worlds and get a more well-rounded drum sound. Looks like we have some sort of small diaphragm condenser on the hi-hat. That looks like a Sennheiser MD421 on the toms. So the good folks over at Sennheiser Neumann are sponsoring this video. They were gracious enough to provide all of the necessary equipment in order to do this. Most of the drum kit in the actual Billie Eilish video was Sennheiser Neumann too, so I think that speaks volumes. So they wanted to show you their new Sennheiser MD421 compact. In this video, we're using it for snare and floor tom, as well as all the voiceover that you're hearing. It's a beast of a microphone, really, really versatile. In the Tame Impala video, I used it on the kick drum and the vocals. They've also updated the clip design to make it really easy to attach onto drums. So we're going to give away 2 of them, the 2 that you've seen in this video. One of them, just make sure you're subscribed and fill out the form down below. The other one is a remix competition that I will mention a little later on in the vid. And then we have something, it almost looks like a TLM 103 on snare bottom. Looks like a snare side mic that might be a Neumann U67, and that's under the hi-hat facing the snare. That is a pretty complicated drum setup. So here is my best guess at what the drum setup looks like. It's comprised of 10 microphones, and some of these are the nicest microphones out there. But this is only half the battle. How do these microphones sit in the context of the rest of the mix? For that, we need to take some cues from Phineas's Mix with the Masters course. So obviously, I don't want to step on their toes and give away information that's behind a paywall. I just want to give a general overview of how they produced Birds of a Feather. So if you're interested, definitely go check out Mix with the Masters, because that is a gold mine of information version, and I'm saying that completely unsponsored. So interesting to note, the studio version of this song uses both sample-based drum loops and also a live drum kit. At the very start of the song, what you're hearing are those drum loops, but by the 30-second mark, we've actually blended in a live drum sound. And even further, Finneas mixed the live drums in order to account for this. Because the song already had a pretty beefy kick and snare sample, he ducked down the sound of the close mics on the kit, like the kick and the snare, and primarily left volume in the room microphones and the drum overheads. This means that the live drum kit is giving us the kind of organic room quality and kind of a sense of space, while the drum loops are holding down the pocket. Now we can emulate this in our recreation. We could use drum triggers, meaning when the recorded kick and the recorded snare play, they also play a sample. All of this is a bit contingent on how our live performance sounds on its own, but it's definitely something to consider in the mix. Now, I would assume, because I'm not seeing any amps here, that the guitar and the bass are both DI or direct input, just plugged straight into whatever's recording the audio. Or, you know, they might be in like another room or in what we call an ISO cabinet. Super quick. I've had the privilege of having these videos do really well in the past, and a lot of that has to do with user engagement. So if you like these videos and you want to see more of them, a like, a subscribe, and a comment, they mean more than I ever realized. So thank you so much.
Don't know what I'm crying for. I don't think I could love you more. Might not be long, but baby, I'll love you till the day that I die.
Now, I want you to notice that the drummer is actually using rods and not regular drumsticks. One thing that I have failed at in the past, and it's pretty hard to control, drum dynamics in a live performance, especially when the musicians are wearing monitors like they are here. A lot of times the drummer is just too loud compared to the singers, and it can kind of end up bleeding into their microphones, not always in the most sort of satisfying, ear-pleasing way. We're trying to get a bleed that is nice and satisfying, so hopefully the size of the room helps with that. It's especially a problem if the vocalist has their back to the drummer, because that means the microphone pickup pattern is actually facing the drum kit. Using rods on the drum kit will mitigate some of the volume going into those dynamic microphones. I love the vocalist on the left, so soulful. Now, turns out, just like how they're using dynamic microphones in this live performance, a fair bit of the studio record was also recorded on a dynamic microphone. That microphone was an Audix OM7. Oftentimes, Finneas and Billie would leave the instrumentals on in the studio monitors, and part of the songwriting process was writing these vocal lines while allowing these parts to bleed.
Yeah, so this is how we recorded this is how
all the vocals of this song. Yeah.
All the vocals on Chihiro were in the room with like the feedback from the speakers in the room.
These speakers were just, we didn't use headphones, we were just kind of...
We didn't invent this, by the way.
Yeah, no, not at all. But it was extremely useful, and
it's a really, really, really useful writing tool for me, especially. Like, it's a lot easier for me to perform.
This was not only a useful writing tool, but some of these recordings ended up in the final version of the song. Now imagine that you have a vocal that has drum bleed coming in through the vocal mic. When you go to send that vocal to a delay or a reverb, inadvertently the drum sound will also end up in those same effects. This is one of the reasons why Birds of a Feather is considered a softer kind of mix. It's because a lot of the individual parts bleed into one another. This kind of like fusing and blending of information creates creates this sort of like a harmonic soup in a way. And it can kind of like subconsciously convince us that this is a more organic live production. Now, it is important to point out that the allure of this dynamic microphone on like a top 100 song is cool, but a large portion of the lead vocals were actually done on a Telefunken 251. And that microphone costs like as much as a used Lexus. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt. Now, in our performance, the goal is to allow the drums to bleed into our live performance as well. And then hopefully when we send those vocals to the reverb and the delays, we get that same sort of soupy production style. Damn, that's good. Now, Birds of a Feather was kind of mixed by 3 different people. Finneas did all the production work and therefore also made a rough mix before sending it to the actual 2 mixers, John Castelli and Aaron Forbes. Aaron Forbes is the creative director for Billie Eilish, I believe. John Castelli is a pretty well-known and pretty world-renowned pop mixer. Now, whenever it comes to Finneas and how he approached this track, I was actually really surprised at how often Finneas chose to use stock Logic plugins. Things like the channel EQ or the Logic compressor, and I even think the main delay of the song was a stock Logic delay. Whenever it comes to third-party stuff, a lot of the reverbs were Valhalla Room Reverb, Valhalla Vintage Verb, and he likes the Sound Toys stuff like Echo Boy and Decapitator. And that's all really cool to see, but it really wasn't until this interview with John Castelli that I really started to understand the mixing process on this record. A few months ago, John did a podcast with Matt Rad, who is also another really amazing mixing engineer in the pop world. Dude, Matt, you gotta make more of these. The last one you posted was 7 months ago. I really came into this podcast mostly to like hear about the Birds of a Feather record, but I left with like a lot of like life lessons about being a mixer, and I felt kind of like seen. Definitely go check it out. And Matt, where's the next upload? Okay, so whenever it comes to Birds of a Feather, one of the key notions that John hit on whenever it came to mixing this third record, he approached it in an analog fashion, but in the digital world. Check out this clip.
A lot of the things I landed on are channel strip things, like very basic, the fundamentals of what you learn from mixing on a console, for example. Like the analog change is done in the digital realm, you know? And I think that's where I've landed. And a lot of the Billie album is like an SSL channel strip with like, you know, the channel compressor on the vocal and, you know, some ozone tape, because the texture of that worked on like a lot of the records on her voice. And instead of EQing, you're just like, how do I enhance this like perfectly recorded vocal?
The word soften came up so often in this podcast.
I didn't nail one of the mixes on the first go around for one of my favorite songs on the album, Birds of a Feather. My instinct was to mix it like a pop song without thinking about it. I just like, you know, I just made it really, it started knocking. It was like big and it was wide. And you know, Finneas was like, well, I'm glad we have like the radio mix on, you know, of this version, but like, I think it needs to be a little softer and a little bit more like, you know, anti-pop type mix, like warmer, darker, like more like the rest of the album. It's completely correct. And I heard it. As soon as he came over and said that, I was like, oh yeah, that's obvious. Let's start over.
As far as I understand, this oftentimes meant doing a lot of coloration to groups rather than going individually into each one of these tracks and then doing a lot of surgical mixing. Rather, using things like an SSL channel strip or a tape emulation on top of the whole drum group or on top of the whole vocal group in order to kind of round out and soften these transients. And that was done primarily through 2 different things. First, the sort of analog approach to mixing, but also fast attack compression.
We can geek out for a minute. Fast attack compression. I've been anti-fast attack compression for probably like 10 years. Like I love transients. I don't want to compress the transients. I want transients to come through, and then if we're going to use compression, we're going to, you know, get it after the fact. And the opposite right now. I like overused fast attack compression on things that just made things sound a little softer and like rounder on the edges. So like kind of vignetted things. Like I wanted things to feel like a little bit mysterious.
Now you might be wondering what fast attack compression is. Let's take this kick drum. This kick drum has a pretty prominent hit in the first half of the recording, and then the tail kind of trails off really quickly. If we actually look at an attack knob on a compressor, what we're actually controlling are milliseconds, specifically when do we want the compressor to engage? So if we were to set a slow attack, let's say like 50 milliseconds, we're telling the compressor to miss the first part of this kick drum and only compress the tail. Therefore, we would gain sustain in the kick drum because we're making it a longer, louder signal, but we wouldn't actually compress that initial hit. Fast attack compression, like 0 milliseconds, would engage as soon as that kick drum makes a sound. By focusing on fast attack compression, we're essentially immediately squashing down all of these transient responses, therefore running the entire sound signal through the circuits of these compressors. And because a lot of these compressors are analog compressors, we're essentially coloring and softening the entire audio signal. This is how you can use a really aggressive, quick compressor in order to color and soften your sounds. So, what are we actually looking at here? Well, we're looking at a monstrous 10 microphone setup. Depending on how our mix sounds, we may blend in drum samples via a drum trigger on the kick and the snare, but we do want to prioritize kind of an organic sound, which means plenty of drum overheads and room tones. We've got 2 different DIs for a guitar and a bass. Those are pretty simple. And then 4 dynamic microphones on all of the singers. We want to try and embrace the bleed of these microphones and allow things like the drum kit to get inside of those vocal recordings, and hopefully whenever we send these to delays and reverbs, they start to blend and mix together. One thing is for sure though, we want to rely on a lot of group processing, and we want to have a kind of analog workflow. This means using tape emulations and whatever sort of analog emulators you might have available to you. Alright, so I'm boring myself a little bit with how technical I'm getting here. Let's go see if I survived this shoot day. Alright, welcome back. Remember me from the intro? I'm back. So let's go over what exactly I did. So we ended up lacing 2 Apollo X8Ps together for a total of 16 inputs. And I really tried my best to blend together the techniques of the studio version with the techniques I was able to see in this live version. This meant for the most part, whenever it came to the actual individual channels, just like Phineas did, I tried to stick with pretty much stock stuff. Stock Ableton EQs, stock compressors, and even like a stock delay. And then whenever it came to the group processing, just like John Castelli did, that's where we added all this sort of analog workflow. For me, that came in the form of an LA2A emulation, Shep's Omni channel, which is a whole channel strip. They used the SSL channel strip. I know Shep's Omni channel really well, and it's like 20 bucks, I think, so it's super approachable. And Goodhertz Wow Control was my tape emulation. That gave me everything I needed for EQ, saturation, and sort of the analog part of this production. So let's talk about drums. We tried to use relatively the same microphones as them, or as close as we could get with our microphone locker. On the kick, we used a Sennheiser E902 on kick in, and we used a Neumann U87 on kick out. Just like Phineas did, I actually ended up using a sample on the kick. We got a lot of bottom end from our recorded kick, but I felt like we needed a bit more punch. So in order to do that, I used a sample and I blended that into our kick in and our kick out sound. So here's how all of that combines together. On the snare, we used the MD421 Compact. We used that on snare bottom. We used a 441 on snare top. And then we used a Sennheiser Mark IV on snare side. I blended all 3 of those together, and this is the snare sound that we got. I thought that was an awesome snare sound, and I didn't use a sample. Now, in terms of overheads, we used a Neumann UM57 on left and right. Those are tube microphones, so those are gonna give us the same sort of darker, rounded transient response that the C12s would have given the original recording. But because we only had 2 of them, I had to use a Neumann U87 as overhead center. I know. Poor me, right? I had to use a different, really expensive, beautiful microphone. Ooh. Here's the overhead sound. And then let's hear how all of these microphones start to blend on top of each other. Now, one thing you'll notice, this is actually a pretty dry, pretty dark drum mix. I actually got a lot of the room sound from the vocal microphones. Just like we were hoping, the bleed that we got from the drum kit ended up being really complementary. It added a lot of top end to the drums, which kind of evened out the mix. And those vocal microphones actually ended up being a really lovely room tone as well. Just like in the studio version of Birds of a Feather, I blended in those vocal microphones over the course of 30 seconds because the backing vocalists aren't really playing anyways until like the first chorus for the most part. This gave us a much drier sound when the song starts and then gives us a bit more of a lively, organic sound by the time the first chorus comes in. Check it out. Now, bass and guitar are both dead simple. They're both just DI, and I ended up using like a Fender Twin emulation on the Telecaster. The bass was mixed as a direct sound, and I love the sound coming out of Rami's pedal board. It was compressed and ran through Shep's Omni channel. Here's both of those sounds mixed and unmixed. Now, as I mentioned, we're giving away 2 microphones. For the first one, it's just a straight up giveaway. I just need your email and make sure that you're subscribed. That's down in the description. And the second one is a remix competition. So you can download the raw tracks for this session in the description as well. And the best mix wins. This is when it's due by, and this is a US only giveaway. I'm sorry, guys. There are no rules to this mix competition. You can make a really solid mix. You could replace the vocals if you want. You could make this like in the style of Deftones. Just make something that you're proud of. I really highly recommend checking out the Patreon. Over there, I break down exactly how I mixed the track. There's also a mix breakdown for every single project on this channel over there. That's for $5 a month. So these vocal microphones sounded absolutely sick, and there wasn't too much I had to do. I used just a basic echo for the delay, and then added reverb. A lot of it was automating things. Automating the volume of the backing vocalist at the end of the song in order to give them a little solo moment. Automating the volume of the reverb on certain phrases in order to make them a bit more dramatic.
Me if I told you, you would keep the compliments I throw you, but you're so full of shit.
And just kind of crafting a narrative based off of the reverb and the effects sends. I will say, compared to the original, I kept the backup singers at a little bit of a higher volume. I thought they all sounded amazing together, and that kind of more democratic vocal mix sounded really, really awesome to me.
Birds of a feather, we should stick together. I know I said I'd never think I wasn't better alone. Can't change the weather, might not be forever, but if it's forever, it's even better. And I don't know what I'm crying for. I don't think I could love you more.
So one last thing, this was a massive production, and this entire video was done in collaboration with an organization called Seawall Sessions. The actual camera work on the performance, that's their baby. So if you ever want to listen to this performance on its own, the standalone performance is on their channel, linked in the description.
So one of the heads of Seawall, Steph, actually made an entire behind the scenes where they interviewed the actual cinematographer behind the Billie Eilish shoot. So if you're at all interested in cinematography and video, that's a companion video to this that is linked down below. Please go check out Lora and her music. I have even produced a lot of it. Anna and Clara are both absolute musical powerhouses as well, so definitely go check them out. And in addition to being an amazing singer-songwriter, Bianca actually just launched her own YouTube channel. Her video about beating cancer is linked down below.
So as a community, let's definitely go show them some love. And that's it. So enjoy the production.
so full of shit. Tell me it's a bit. Oh, say you don't see it. Your mind's polluted. Say you wanna quit. Don't be stupid. And I don't know what I'm crying for. I don't think I could love you more. Might not be long, but baby, I don't wanna say goodbye. We should stick together. I know I said I'd never think I wasn't bad as my life. Can't change the weather, nights, not till the day I die. I know you in another life. You had that same look in your eyes. I love you, don't act so
All right, guys, massive thank you to everyone who worked on this project. Thank you to Sennheiser Neumann for sponsoring this video. And check out the giveaways and the link down below. See you next time. Bye-bye.